Hey everybody, my name's Craig. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about ethics. Look at my nice black shirt. It was dark, serious, like those ethical guys that, sit and pontificate about good and bad, right and wrong. That's me. It's this guy. Anyway, I want to talk more about ethics. So last time I talked about the philosophical foundations of ethics, and today I want to talk about ethics itself. Like I said before, it's the study of the search for the good. What is good, what is bad. It's also the application of that thinking to try to come up with and figure out what is the good action or what is the bad action. Now I think there are two kind of approaches to this. One is a top-down approach, one is a bottom-up approach. A lot of the ancient stuff and a lot of the modern religious stuff is top-down. Often it has starts with presuppositions. So like there is a ultimate good, or there is a God, or there are gods, or there is a universe or something that dictates or otherwise explains to us what the right or good action is, what good is, or is good itself. And then that's the standard to which everything else is measured. If it's like that, it's good. If it's not like that, it's bad. Or if that thing tells you that this action is good, then it's good. If that thing tells you that this action is bad, then it's bad. So if, for example, God says killing is bad, killing is bad. And then on the other hand, you have the bottom-up approach, which is typically axiomatic. It starts with things like, it's also way more contemporary, modern. It starts with things like pleasure is generally preferable to pain, life is generally preferable to death, and then kind of builds up from there. So in this instance, like killing is still bad because it inflicts pain and it causes death. Both of them have their good points and bad points. And both can be exploited. If you have really bad thinking, or your authority is bad, or people who say that they're an authority and hear from the authority are bad. So they have their highs and lows, and I'm sure I'll talk about those things in the future more specifically. And so in my time thinking about ethics and studying these things, I've always kind of had a mind for trying to figure out right and wrong and why it's right and wrong. I've come to the realization that that the primary fallacy, or the primary way we think wrong about ethics, what's good and bad, is errors of scope or context. And I know, and the other one is an obfuscation of ultimates, which I talked about in another video, where people try to take nuanced positions and push them out to the extremes. Or they talk about the absolute when they really mean the mundane, or they mean the mundane and other people hear the absolutes. And so I already know that some of y'all are making that mistake right now. I say, ethics depends on context or scope, and you're automatically thinking, this guy just, he's just talking about moral relativism, and you can just ignore him because morals aren't relative, they're absolute, and yeah, that's silly. First of all, we automatically know that ethics are context-based. We know that you shouldn't drive as fast as you do on the highway as you do down the road in front of a school when the kids are being let out. Because we know that the danger to children is way higher if people drive fast. And we, tend to not like to see children die. Good thing. So we enact laws, we do, speed limits in school zones. When you talk to your friends, you talk in a different way than you do in front of your boss. That's context dependent, good choices and bad choices. That's ethics. And even moral relativism, to me, is silly. Yes, if you go out in the middle of nowhere and set up a situation where you don't have to interact with anyone else and nothing you do will have consequences to anyone else, yes, that makes me kind of a consequentialist, then it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want to do and it will only impact you. So knock yourself out. Completely relative. Almost completely relative. There are certain things the body can't do. If you don't eat, you're going to die. That's not... and you can make that choice, but, there you go. It's bad for you. And we don't get to make that. We don't really get to make that decision. So that one's more objective. So it's not completely relative. It is relative, but not completely relative. So keep it in the middle, y'all. So when I talk about context and scope, the more I think about it, the more I realize that there are at least 3 different areas. And each one, the first one has, 2 sections. The middle one, I think, just has 1. Third one has 3, at least, probably. And the first one is personal, what we call morality. What I think is good or bad behavior. And then the social version of that is just social morality, the idea of the group. And the thing to remember about these particular scopes is that what defines the different scopes is who gets to make the rules and who enacts the consequences for violations of those ethical rules. So on the personal morality, which I think can be the strictest. Now there are certain people who have morality that needs to be bound by the other areas I'll talk about in a second. But I think we can be the most restrictive with ourselves of, I know this isn't going to break any laws, but I still don't think it's right for me. And it can be really restrictive. This is, the things that I think are right and wrong. And if I break those rules, then I will punish myself. This can be anything from wanting to do a diet. And so for me, the good action would be to not eat that Snickers bar. But if I do eat that Snickers bar, then I will have consequences for myself, which is like running an extra mile. It can also go the other way of, I did really good this month, going back to diet. And so I'm going to take a cheat day and have a piece of that cake or the whole cake. So it can kind of go both ways. Now the social group morality is just the social group. It's your friends group. It's your church group. It's, your family group. It's what the group together, and it's usually not explicit, it's not spoken, it's not really talked about, but it's the things that the group does and the things that the group doesn't do. If my last name was Johnson, I'd have the family discussion, and these are the things the Johnsons do. These are the things the Johnsons don't do. These are the things that are okay at church. These are things that are not okay at church. They're not, sometimes they are, but they're not usually codified. But there are still group consequences if you don't do them. So if you are mean to your friends, they will exclude you or make fun of you or punish you some way. If you go and, you go to church and start cussing up a storm, they will not be happy with you. So, yeah, social. Personal morality, social morality of the group. And then another section is professional ethics. These are the ethics of professional groups, medical ethics or psychological ethics or the code of conduct in your employee handbook. These are decided on by the leadership and enforced by the leadership. Now, a lot of times the actual morality, the actual code of conduct may grow up from the bottom, but is decided on and implemented by the top. So if you go to work in the wrong clothing, they will send you home. If you tell off your boss, you'll get fired. If you don't do your job, they will not continue to let you do your job. If you break the medical ethics, they will take away your license, for example. And then the third, that one's pretty straightforward. You're in a professional setting, you need to act like a professional, and if you don't, the other professionals will punish you. You will have consequences for your behavior. The last section of the 3 is kind of the legal realm. It's the group taken up big time. And I do think there are 3 levels related to, like, the first one is just the legal, legislative, the things that impacts the people in the group. So, laws against speeding, laws against monopolies, those kinds of things. And they are made by a legislating body, hopefully, in the United States it is at least, and it's the consequences are determined by the judicial and executive, systems. Go United States government. And then the second group, in the 3 of the third, is the body politic. It's what the people in the group think make up a good group. It's the, thinking of what laws we should have. Not the enforcement of that or the making of them specifically, but what kind of society are we, and what kind of laws do we want, what kind of economic structures do we want. It's the argument between, like, socialism and capitalism. What kind of political body do we want? Do we want a republic or a democracy or a constitutional government or some awesome mix of all of them? That's kind of, it's politics. And then the third out of the group is international. It's from one nation interacting with another nation. So group between group. This is things like international trade. This is things like war and interactions of national sovereignty. And these groups, these sections that I've outlaid are really important in ethical thinking because very often we get them confused. My favorite example, and I'll talk about this a lot more in another video, so I'll just run through it pretty quick, is the freedom of speech. The freedom of speech is a legal right. It's a legal freedom. In other words, you can say almost whatever you want. There are some exceptions, namely threats, fighting words, those kinds of things, that you can say almost whatever you want to without fear of retaliation or consequence from the governing body. It's pretty great. You can say whatever you want to, almost, about the president, and you're not going to have a government official or employee or police officer coming and knocking down your door because you said something mean about the president. That's not going to happen. The problem with thinking about free speech in these terms, and where a lot of people get it wrong in my opinion, is that you do not have professional ethics free speech. You cannot go into your business and talk however you want to your boss or your employees or your customers or clients. You just can't do that. There will be consequences. You go in and talk a bunch of crap to your boss, you're probably going to get fired. If you go and talk, divulge confidential information, if you're a doctor, about your clients to other people, there will be consequences. You cannot say whatever you want to without consequences in the professional ethics domain. You do not have social morality free speech. You can't go up to your friend and say whatever you want to them without consequences. You can't walk into an assembly of people and say whatever you want to and not, invoke the ire of other people. I mean, you can't even like, in some groups, you can't even like cuss in front of your mom without consequences, getting a shoe thrown at you or something, I don't know. And the really funniest part about it is you don't even have personal free speech. Like, you will yourself, when you say things that you didn't want to say or don't want to say, you will punish yourself for the words you say. You don't even have technically free speech personally. And so when people get on like Facebook or Twitter and say something just horrendous and the society at large retaliates and gives them consequences and says, this type of speech isn't okay in this group, then that's not a freedom of speech issue. And even Facebook. And they have community standards. They are a business, but their professional ethics only apply to their employees. The community standards, the community guidelines on the site are to facilitate a social group. So you can't say whatever you want. You can't post whatever you want without potential consequences by Facebook. You might get blocked for a while or suspended or even just straight up deleted, depending on what you say. And even inside smaller groups on Facebook, they've created a system so that people can create small groups and have admins that can maintain a different set of community standards. And even in some of the most accepting groups that have the biggest ideas of free speech, they value free speech so much, all the ones I'm in are pretty particular about certain kinds of speech. No derogatory language, no attacking each other, no slurs. And so you don't really, even in those places, your speech is limited. And if you violate those terms, you're done. There will be consequences. So you don't have free speech. Free speech is a legal right. And so the context really matters. So I hope you like this video about ethics, good and evil, and the different contexts, the moral and social moral, the professional ethics, and the legal sections of morality, and the importance of keeping those contexts separate, or at least acknowledging the context of each area when you're thinking about the good and the bad and the good decision, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for a business, whether it's for society at large, in enforceable ways. So tell me what you think about all this. If you think my ideas are crazy, or if you think they're spot on, tell me that they're spot on, because, it would be good for you to tell me that my thinking is great. Actually, I want to have open discussions on this stuff. So please say what you want in the comments. But you do not have free speech there, and if you're mean and you're a jerk, I will block you. I will delete your stuff and block you from my areas of authority. But feel free to disagree with me. I want that. I want to learn. I wrote in a post earlier today about how the highest human knowledge comes from cooperation and struggle. When we struggle together towards knowledge, we'll get to the highest forms of it. So please, come struggle with me. Let's work together to try to find the highest, the best good in every situation. So, thank you all for joining me. You'll have a great day. Don't kill yourself to live. Peace. See ya. Can't remember what I was thinking. Oh no! I lost my train of thought. I'm also gonna fix this monitor. See if anybody notices it. This will make a really good outro in card thing. So like and subscribe as I whisper. Tell your friends. Come listen to me talk about what's good and bad. It'll be fun.